You mentioned Simon Case. He's the former, the Cabinet Secretary, appearing at the COVID inquiry. Previous appearance at council because he's been off sick for a very long period of time. I don't know what that is. I don't know whether it's ever been known even unofficially. It's up to you. But he's giving evidence as well. Now, this is a man, of course. We've seen some of his WhatsApps that he's sent over the lockdown period, where he was just totally in cahoots, laughing at people having to pay thousands to go into quarantine when they came off flights. He was totally in on everything. And bearing in mind the reason why it was Sue Gray who took over from him. And that investigation into Partygate was because he was aware of the parties and some of them had been in his office. His office is not his personal office. His staff were attending them. I'm sorry, I've got no time for this man. He's clearly a massively over-promoted, jumped up narcissist.
Well, he's a civil servant. And
again, at 11 o'clock, I find it extraordinary. I was gunning for Boris Johnson because I think politicians shouldn't lie to us and they shouldn't have laws that they don't obey themselves. How strongly I feel about that. I know a lot of you disagree with me still on that one. Still think that was the right thing to do. Tories would be doing just as badly right now if Boris was in charge. However, I never understood how Simon Case was still in a job.
For me, though, it is the tragedy of Boris Johnson's administration, is that the man that he brought in, who everybody knew was a bit of a loose cannon, to oversee it, his big thing was civil service reform, was changing this culture, this attitude. And, of course, it never got off the ground because it was the Boris Johnson show and it was never going to happen. And then COVID happened. And, of course, then we went even bigger into the big state. It's just, you couldn't write it, really. It was just completely farcical. But, of course, this is a man who is very much at the core of all of this, of the Partygate. Everybody, I think, still in the back of their minds remembers. And that little bit of grit, that little bit of, even if it's died from fury to anger, it's always going to be there in the back of your mind, just like,
never forgive,
those people.
Never forget. I'm amazed at the people who just say, oh, look, we've moved on. If you think we've moved on, you're insane. Because genuinely, this is where I do still hold a candle for Rishi Sunak. I think he was the lone member of that quad that were the four people who were deciding policy, who was arguing, I know this for a fact, was arguing against lockdowns again and again and again. If he'd been in charge, we would not have been, because he can actually add up and do numbers and does detail in a way that Boris Johnson doesn't. Okay, he wasn't able to actually achieve that, but I'm just saying that is something that counts. The economic mess we're in, largely as a result of that. The NHS mess, largely as a result of that. I'm sorry, these things matter. Let me also ask you, just briefly, also about the news yesterday that Ireland, Spain and Norway have recognised the Palestinian state. I don't even begin to understand this. Well, where? Doesn't a state need to have borders and things like that for you to recognise it?
It was a proper who cares moment. The Republic of Ireland. Oh, great. Well, this country that's got no military and no. It's
Ireland, by the way, Ireland. If when you are ever invaded by somebody, we know you expect us to come to your help. Well, good luck with that.
I just think I have to say, actually, there is a really nasty stream of anti-Semitism across Irish politics at the moment. I don't know about the other two. I can't speak for that. But in the case of Spain, saying that self-determination is the right to statehood, well.
Catalonia.
That's going to cause some really interesting conversations in the Basque Country and Catalonia.
Yeah,
exactly. And who knows, maybe those Spanish enclaves in Morocco as well. It's like, I don't think you want to go down that route.
Why don't we reward those Hamas terrorists on behalf of the Palestinian state by giving them this? But also yesterday, and again, that's amazing how little coverage it's got on mainstream television. But families of 7 female Israeli soldiers. Bearing in mind, there's conscription. You don't have a choice. If you want to live in Israel, you want to maintain Israeli citizenship or dual citizenship, you have to serve in the military. And these are very, very, very young women captured by Hamas on October the 7th. Extraordinary footage of these girls just huddled on the floor on their phones, calling them their mums, absolutely terrified. And then you've got the soldiers in this graphic footage of their abduction. Basically, take these girls, the ones who can get pregnant. These girls are being held by murderous, rapist, torturing terrorists right now. And the families have chosen to release this video basically to remind everybody, look, these terrorists are still holding their children.
The ambassadors, the Israeli ambassadors from these 3 countries were all recalled yesterday. And the one to Norway did actually put out a tweet saying, I would like people to forgive me for failing to convince the Norwegian government that actually you shouldn't reward rapists and terrorists for abducting people. But that's what's happened. And I'm sorry I failed in my duty.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Look,